Okay, so we're now recording, and this is the case planning session. And I've actually got a very, very basic client that I've imagined for this scenario, and it suits our purposes as well. I don't need to spend a lot of time on Benji here, but for the purposes of putting together a plan, this will help us out. The client's name is Benji. His aim is to sit on the beach to surf in Queensland, and we're going to help him put a case plan together. The tool that's on the screen at the moment, pretty typical of what you're going to find to help people put into place on paper what their goals are. Anybody got any ideas as to why we would do this? Why we're bothering to put it in writing? Because we could do away with the bureaucracy, do away with the paperwork, just have a conversation where people put their plans together. Why are we bothering with this in writing? What advantage is there to the client to write this stuff down?
It helps you remember finer detail.
Remembering the finer detail? Yep. Any other? To put it on record, so for our purposes, for our records, and for theirs. That's what I see as the beauty of it, is we can actually give this to the client. We might keep a copy of it for our records, but if we give it to the client, I don't know about you, if I was to go and see somebody for 10 minutes and they said, okay David, what you've got to do is, and they gave me a list of things to do, I'd remember 2 or 3 of those. It's not so easy to remember in your head a whole list of anything more than 2 or 3. It's certainly easier when it's in writing to have all the steps for each of those objectives put down. So let's take a look at how we'd go about it. We would begin looking at, you notice this particular version has my case plan written at the top of it. My preference is for us to take an attitude of not, I'm putting a plan together for the client. I want you to have an attitude of, I'm helping you put your plan together for how you are going to go further. There's a bit of a difference there. It's just a subtle psychological one, but it's about working with the client and empowering them as much as possible. It's about disempowering ourselves and putting it into their plan, into their space. So that's why it says my case plan at the top, and good ones that I've seen with organisations such as St Luke's Innovative Services, instead of saying client signature, actually says my signature at the bottom. So it's very much focused on the client owning this piece of paper. I've left it at client because it's more the norm and it stops you getting confused as the person writing things. The first step, you're going to put the name at the top, and you're going to capture the date, and you're going to capture what the person's overall goal is. Now normally, one of the mistakes I've seen students do this when we're role-playing it is they say, so what's your overall goal? Ideally you've had a bit of a conversation with the client beforehand, and you should be able to extract from that full conversation summarising what it is they're after. So you'll notice the language here, to drive my own car to Queensland before December. We're not saying for him to get a car or for him to go to. It's me with my own car. So again, we're putting it in that language where it's Benjamin's piece of work here. If you're to become a counsellor, or even to use counselling techniques in some of your work, a classic question that they ask in solution-focused therapy is, spending a bit of time exploring this first space. I actually say, when we've been successful, which is a really great way to start the sentence, when we have been successful, not if we're successful, but when we're successful, how will you know? What's your ultimate goal at the end of all of this? The other reason I like an overall goal is because it gives you something to aim for. Here's what we're aiming for. We're not aiming for Benjamin's total independence. We're not aiming for Benjamin to have a PhD or for Benjamin to have a job. The objective is, and everything else that leads up to this, is for him to reach that particular goal. So this is a very simple one, but it's often, in my experience, an overall goal of, for me to be independent of my parents, or for me to feel like I'm not at risk of harm anymore, or for me and my baby to feel safe. That's a good overall destination you're aiming for. The next step, and again this is probably already stuff that you've come about with through a bit of discussion with the client, is to capture each of the areas that you would need to get in place in order to reach that overall goal. So in Benjamin's case, he needs to buy a car, he needs to get a licence. Those are the 2 general areas for him to work on. A common trap is that people, as soon as they hear any one of these, they start problem solving straight away and working their way across the form. Before you touch that second column, I want you to be able to look at all of the items in the first column and say, okay, Benjamin, if you've bought a car and if you've got a licence, if we've got those two things solved, is that going to be enough for you to reach your ultimate goal of driving your own car to Queensland before December? It might not be. What else do you reckon? I'm seeing a few shaking heads there. What else do you reckon could also be on as a task?
Think about fuel, registration.
Okay, fuel, rego. Well, the rego would be, so maybe you're not buying a car, maybe having a roadworthy car would be the overall goal here. So that would be a better way of wording that one.
Money to actually stay up there or...
Okay, so his objective was to get his own car to Queensland, but you're saying another one could actually be to have a pocket full of money, let's be specific, enough finances to not be destitute when he gets there. So what was the last comment?
The accommodation.
Some accommodation.
Sleep in the car.
He could sleep in the car. He's actually got someone he's going to visit up there. So basically for him to do this, he needs to get those. But that's the question you're asking. You're on the right track there. Asking the client, okay, if I've got this one, and any others sorted, if you've got each of those issues sorted, then is that going to be enough for you to reach your overall goal? Only then do you start looking at the other columns. So the second is to go down, the third step is to move across. And again, look at each of the tasks in this second column, and you notice I left a bit of space here between the issues for you to write down each of the tasks necessary. And again, you're asking that same sort of question. Okay, so Benji, when we've got all of these tasks sorted, is that going to be enough to resolve that issue? And the reason I say that is because quite often people just write the first point. Buy a car, their first point is going to be work at the abattoirs, save some money. That's the first thing in your mind. That's a good thing to have, but there's going to be a bit more to it than that. There's going to be also going to the dealer, getting a suitable car. There could be a few discussions with somebody about who's going to go with you. There's lots of steps. Write them all down. Remember that clients who are in crisis will often need step by step exactly all the things they need to do it. It's no good just saying get a licence, that's easy. There's a few steps involved in order to get the licence. If you've got the steps, number one, they're in crisis, it makes their life easier. Number two, if they're not in crisis, that still makes life easier to have all the steps listed. Number three, even if it's not to make it easier, it's to make it feel like there's some progress going on. If you only list get the licence, the final task, you might be making progress there, but you're not ticking anything off. You're not actually seeing anything until the final one's in place. Does that make sense? If I had an objective, if I had an issue that said, I need some money, as you stated. Fantastic. We've got an issue, money. What are the steps involved in getting some money? Get a job. So that's a matter of going out and getting a job, or is there a few steps in getting a job? Is there a few steps involved in getting a job?
Yes.
Okay, so what are the steps?
Make sure you have the skills and qualifications.
Getting a resume. There could be a whole process around getting some education, but yeah, getting a resume together, actually applying for, let's say, at least 3 jobs. Let's say registering with a job network agency. There's a few different things there. List them all down. If all it says is get a job, then the client could have spent the week frantically working, frantically searching, and they've got really nothing to show for it. Whereas if you've got the steps listed, they can at least say, well, hey, I haven't reached the destination yet, but I have at least made some progress along that journey. That's the third advantage. Okay, so you work your way right across. How do we plan to do it? Who's going to do it? So some things are going to be the client's job, some things are going to be our job. Generally speaking, this third column, who will do it, generally speaking only lists 2 parties. That's you, the worker, and the client. Because you're the one sitting at the table that can make the deal of you'll do this and I'll do that. Here we must have had the agreement that Benjamin's dad was also going to be involved. That's one of the exceptions, but generally speaking this is just a list of names. Caseworker, Benjamin, caseworker, whatever. Work your way all the way across for each issue. Give it set dates so that you've got something to aim for. And the final column would actually be to tick it off when that's actually been done. So at a later date, when the client comes back to you, you can go with that. And then for each different issue, work your way all the way across. So you notice at first I said fill in the entire first column before going on, but then once you start with these, go all the way across for each separate issue. Is this making sense? It shouldn't be rocket science. It should be actually something pretty straightforward that everybody understands, because that's what we're doing for our clients as well. Put a signature at the bottom. It's our cultural way of saying yes, you agree to it and I agree to it. There's your signature, there's my signature. Okay, let's try another one. Another client here. My name is Simo. I'm scared to go home in case I get hurt again. I need to keep my baby safe, but I don't have any food or anywhere to go or any spare nappies or spare clothes or anything. Can you help me, please? Okay, what might Simo's overall goal be?
Stay safe.
To stay safe? Yep, what else? What's an alternative? It's going to be up to... Capture Simo's own words. This one, it feels more like it's Simo's plan too. No, that's a task. We actually want, okay, the overall goal. Working on these, one at a time. Simo's overall goal would be to stay safe, or to know that me and my baby are safe long term. One possible part of that is accommodation, but there's also nappies, clothes, various other things. Let's draw up a plan. So working on this second column here, we've got an overall goal of to feel safe long term. What are the issues that Simo's going to need to get done in order to be able to feel safe long term? A restraining order. Yep, or overall safety from the partner. Restraining order is one way of doing that. What else?
Find another accommodation.
Find accommodation, yes. Yeah, you got it. Accommodation is one. So, accommodation, physical safety, food, thank you, nappies, and clothes. So, okay, we've got 5 different issues there, once you've caught all of them. So, Simo, if we have organised long-term accommodation and some overall safety, some food and some clothes and some nappies, is there anything else that you would need in order to reach your overall goal of feeling safe long-term? And Simo may come out with, okay, if we've got all those sorted, no, there's actually my dog. I've got a dog at home still, and I'm worried that I'm not going to feel safe if I know that that dog could also be, yeah, cool, okay, let's add that to the list. Put it down there. Don't be afraid of using multiple pieces of paper. One of the common problems that I see with students' work is they will list one after the other in this column here what the issues are. And the reason that's a problem is because in the next column there's actually several steps for each, and you get yourself into a bit of a trap there. You start to write, here's the steps involved in getting accommodation. Apply for government housing, apply for rentals, emergency housing. So there's a few steps there involved in getting the accommodation sorted. What's a rental going to expect of you if you go to a real estate agent? They're going to expect some bond, they're going to expect some sort of a reference. Okay, so there's a few more steps there. What do we got? Bond, reference, actually finding the place. It sounds like there's about 8 to 10 steps involved in just getting the accommodation sorted. The problem that happens is if you listed all of those in this first column one after the other, you realise you're starting to run out of space, and then you move on to the next one which says getting food and nappies, and you realise you don't have much space, and so part of your head says, oh, let's just write St Vincent's, they'll be able to work the rest out. Totally contrary to what we were saying earlier, which is put all of the steps down. And really, I was running out of paper. This is a plan for somebody's life and safety. I was running out of paper as the crappiest excuse in the world. I'll just delete that word out later. It was the worst excuse in the world for why you would make a short plan for somebody. So make sure you space out all of the issues here. That was accommodation. She's probably going to need some money. There's a few steps involved in that as well. What else did we say? Food and nappies are all available from the same services usually. So that doesn't need quite so much space, but allow that space, work on each one, work the way across. Let's try the next one. My name is Kazer. I'd like to get back with my ex, but my ex won't take me back until I've given up stealing stuff to pay for my heroin habit. Maybe I should give up that stuff, but it's so hard to cope all by my lonesome. Can you help me? Starting with your own pieces of paper in front of you there. Let's see if we can get the first couple of lines sorted. So just starting at step 1. Client's name, date. What do you think the overall goal would be? Yeah, I suppose you can. Looks like a few people have written, but there's a couple still writing. I'll give you another 15 seconds or so. Don't go on with the rest of the table. Just start with this first part at the top here. Okay, very first line. The client's name is... The overall goal, what's the possible overall goal that Kazer may have stated here? So just one at a time, sorry? To get back with the ex. What did you guys have? For me to get back with my ex. So personalise it to the client. The ideal would be the client feels a lot of ownership with this. For me to get back with my ex, what did you guys have?
Heroin habit.
To kick the heroin habit. Did anybody else mention that? Okay, how did you word yours? For me to give up my heroin habit. Something similar. The only problem with the heroin one is that's not actually the ultimate goal. Giving up the heroin would be a step towards the ultimate goal of getting back with the ex. And I tricked you there quite deliberately, because it's a common problem that we have is we latch on to stuff that we feel should be done or that we saw as important. So I'm sorry to have trapped you that way, but that's essentially it is. It might be a trigger for you of, oh yeah, you got to get that done. That's important to me that you do this thing. But what the client has actually said is, my overall objective is for me to get back with my ex. Now's your chance, writing down what are the different, and it's again pretty much on the board there, what are the different issues. Don't start planning how to resolve each issue now. What are the overall issues? There should be a few of them. I'll give you all a chance to write them down. And use your imagination. It might not be just the words on the board. There could be a bit more to it than that. Did you have a question or an answer?
An answer.
Hold on to your answer just to give other people a chance to write down their versions. I would think that there would have to be probably at least 3 things, 3 big issues that need to be resolved, but you may find more in order to reach that ultimate objective. Okay, you've had long enough now. You were having an answer?
My
Yep.
view is the stealing to pay for
Okay.
the heroin habit itself, and the actual fact trying to cope without the heroin would be my 3 issues.
So giving up heroin, or at least putting in a maintenance, because that can be a long term thing. So having the drug use under control is probably more realistic. Fantastic, I'll get to that in a moment. So having the drug use under control. What was the second one?
The stealing.
Giving up the stealing, yep. We're not doing these in order. It's just capture each of the issues. I'll get to the order in a moment. So the drugs under control, the stealing under control, and what was the third?
Trying to cope without the drugs.
Learning to live without drugs, because there's a whole lifestyle that goes along with that. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else anybody could think of? Yes? So a new social support network as part of the learning to live without drugs? Yep. So that could go either as an objective in the first column or one of the strategies for learning to live without drugs. Forming a new social network would be a task in order to reach that objective. So he was just saying, you had a comment there?
I was going to say something similar, but there's also getting in contact with the ex.
Getting in contact with the ex. Has anybody mentioned the ex yet in theirs? Excellent, well done. The X should be, I thought, a pretty essential part of it. If the ultimate objective is the X, then you would ask yourself, so we would ask Kazer, if we've got you coping without the drugs, if we've got the drug use managed, if we've got the stealing managed, is that going to be enough to reach your overall goal of getting back with your ex? Do you reckon it would be? There's another step there. When you term it like that, it's like, well, no, I won't be back with my ex just because I've got my life in gear. Okay, so what else? Well, I need to talk to him or her.
I might need some relationship counselling.
Some relationship. The overall issue is, let's try to separate the issue from how to go about that. The overall issue would be rebuild relationship with ex. Yes, counselling is a possible start. There could be other ways that you go about that. But that would be the other major issue. The other important element of the whole thing is it's what we call a living document. It's going to keep changing. It will have bits added, bits taken away, bits that we really realised weren't feasible, but that's how we'd go with it. What I'm teaching you to do is help the client put their goal together for how they're going to do things in future. Can anybody hazard a guess as to what the next column, the actual steps involved in getting control of my drug use, might be? I revised it from giving up to gaining control of the heroin use. So first step for rehabilitation is what? Is to actually make the phone call to one of the specialist services and follow their plan. I'm not a specialist, I don't know the whole process. People who are using heroin tend to know better than me. So I can certainly introduce them to the specialist, and if they're able to say that step 1 is withdrawal, step 2 is rehabilitation for 6 months, step 3 is do this, step 4 is methadone long term, whatever. I would leave that to a specialist, but I would at least put down what we think the plans are.